Keep talking. Thanks.
All right, a week off and we didn't miss a beat. We are back in Florida after a week's hiatus and our last live sip in the vineyards at Tamber Bay and Napa Valley. This week we are going to jump right into summer whites. But before we do, there was some massive news today. And I'm not talking about that there's a certain tax return that we're going to get access to, but really let's focus on the north side of Chicago, where the Cubs decided to unload the linchpin of the World Series championship team in 2016. In the last 24 hours, we saw the departure of Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Javier Baez, and a couple of other players, one of which went to the White Sox, which we all know is a cardinal sin. And so I'm in mourning because the Cubs it shouldn't be that Scotland Kiefer sad day on the north side. It absolutely was. But we have a certain excellent opportunity this evening to remedy that, because our guest this evening is a good personal friend of ours, and we had the pleasure of spending some time with him 2.5 weeks ago. And I'm thrilled that we were able to stop in because luckily we phoned ahead and made an appointment to see Jack. But for those of you that are new this evening, just want to give you a heads up. Cellar Angels is a private direct-to-consumer wine company. We specialize exclusively in Napa and Sonoma wineries that you don't have access to via the retail setting throughout the country, because they, quite honestly, don't have the distribution because they don't make enough wine. They make excellent wine, superior wine. All of it's usually hand harvested. And tonight we have just such an occasion to taste two wines. And I want to get right into it with our guest this evening because it's a special opportunity to really explore in our educational series, Summer Whites. And throughout most of the country right now, especially here in South Florida, the mercury is peaking out in the mid 90s. I've seen it that way in California, Arizona, Chicago, the Northeast. So you need some sort of wine to actually quench the thirst that is great for the patio, the lanai, the boat, the deck, that you can have in abundance and isn't going to break the bank. And two of those are going to be featured this evening. This is a little event we call the Scotland, in name of Scotland Kiefer, who commented earlier about the Cubs, because Scotland routinely likes to open up 2 bottles of wine a night. So we nicknamed this for him. Without further ado, I want to introduce our guest this evening. Jack Seafrick is the managing partner of Cass Wines and had the crazy idea, like many of us have had, to what about if we bought a vineyard? And we can go through that story this evening, but it's in a special place. The place is behind me. This is just one of the many areas that you can actually sit down, enjoy $1 million views, and the wine tasting experiences are really second to none in the Valley. So Jack, it's good to see you again. Cheers.
Cheers, Martin. Good to see you and Denise again. Happy to be with your Cellar Angels cadre.
Us too. And while I'm not in, I mean, I am in mourning. You actually are coming off a victory in a sport that you introduced me to briefly called, and I'd like to know in the chat who here has ever heard of pétanque, because I had never heard of the sport pétanque. So if you've heard of that, let me know, because that would be amazing. Doug Rutherford, how are you doing? Hans and Caitlin, Ivy, Jan Kiefer, who we saw in Napa. Jan was a sport to come out and visit us at a tasting. Jeff and Jane Greasy. I know the Holdens are with them. Jim Brubaker in Colorado, Linda in Colorado, Peter Glick. Peter, I cannot remember where you are. And Scotland, of course, sobbing tears out of his eyes for me in Chicago so far on the chat. So briefly, Jack, tell me what pétanque is before we get into the wines.
Pétanque is the French version of bocce ball. It's very similar to bocce ball. The difference being, number one, you use a metal, they call them boules. So the ball is metal instead of wood. And number two, being French, they didn't want to be in a rectangle. So it's very kind of loosey-goosey. A good example, Martin, is the background in your picture there is actually the Cass pétanque court, which doubles as our hospitality beach for wine tastings during the day. But then Ann and I are in a pétanque league here in Healdsburg, and we go around all kinds of fabulous facilities and homes around the area and play in a pétanque tournament. So
sounds like a very high class way to drink wine in the evening.
it was started by French soldiers using cannonballs, like I don't know how many 100 years ago, but
oh, very cool. All right, let's get to kind of cast and where you are as a winery. We mentioned Healdsburg, and I'm going to show some Google Earth a little bit later, but talk to me about kind of the location of the winery.
So we're in Sonoma County. If you drove north on the 101 from the Golden Gate Bridge, you'd come to the Dry Creek Road exit after an hour, and then drive up the Dry Creek Valley, which is one of the Appalachians in Sonoma County. We're in this beautiful valley. You can see the opposing side of the valley in the picture behind you, and so it's an AVA known as a warm microclimate. Predominantly known, I guess, for Zinfandel. It's probably one of the premier places that Zinfandel is grown in the world, and you know, the town here is Healdsburg. Our technical address is Geyserville, but most people who go to wine country would know or would use Healdsburg as their hub, and from there you can have this amazing variety of different microclimates and AVAs. Russian River Valley, Alexander Valley. You're only an hour from Calistoga and Napa Valley, and Dry Creek Valley, where we are.
And you purchased this vineyard what year?
We bought the property in 2012. We bought an existing vineyard and a small kind of rundown house, and then it took 2 years to get our approvals and design and construct the initial winery. So crush of 2014 was the first fruit that we brought into the winery here. We had used a friend's winery for the 12 and 13 vintages so that we would have some wines when we did get open. So we've been open and functioning now for about 7 years.
And when you start out, I mean, everybody that goes to the Valley multiple times, there is that epiphany where they look around and they say, you know, this actually doesn't stink. This is pretty good. This is pretty special. Maybe we could make a go of this. Maybe we could buy a little vineyard, and then the seed gets planted, if you will. When did you know that not only was the seed planted, but it was being germinated, it was being nourished, and you thought, okay, not only do I not just want to own a winery, I want to own production, I want to own winemaking, I want to do the whole 9 yards. How did that whole dream come to fruition?
It's all a bit of a fog, Martin. No, you know, we were out here. My wife and I were living in Dallas, Texas. We raised 2 daughters there. We're there for decades. We were infrequent visitors to wine country. Came out here every 2 or 3 years. We were out here celebrating our youngest going off to college as newly minted empty nesters in a harvest of 2011. I have a buddy who's one of the founding families of Schramsberg over in Calistoga, and so we had always been invited to a harvest party, a picnic thing there. We could never go because of kids, and so all of a sudden in 2011 we had the freedom, so we came out here, spent a couple of weeks, really fell in love with wine country. It was probably 2 months later I was out here kind of looking at property. We just thought it was very beautiful and an interesting world, and we wanted to, you know, Dallas is fine, and we still have roots in a home in Dallas, but there's just something special about being in what I think is kind of America's Eden out here, and I had been introduced to a few people who had started wineries from scratch, and so the notion that was possible took root, and then we couldn't have done it without the help of some friends and family who are our investors and supporters. So really, it was you know, about 9 months after that harvest 2011 that we actually closed on the vineyard and began the process of creating cask.
Wow. And then where does the cast name come from?
The name is a reference to the spectacular view here and the spell that it casts upon you. So, and it also evokes kind of the magic of wine and the special nature of how wine brings people together and is a way to celebrate life. So it rang true for us. Our logo, and you can see it on all our bottles, is it's maybe here, but it's a little wine fairy. She's casting a spell on all of you right now. There you go.
I like it. I like it. And so now today you're at what production as far as cases?
We've actually ramped up quite a bit in the last year and a half in terms of our planning. We entered the pandemic about 4,000 cases a year. We have a crush plan for this harvest, which will start in about a month to do 5,900 cases this year. So kind of an ambitious growth pattern right now for us. And so that puts us on the kind of the large end of small wineries,
Right, exactly.
and a tiny little speck in terms of big wineries. I mean, I have Ferrari Carano across the street from us, for example, that does 800,000 cases a year, and here we are at 5 or 6. So we're very small compared to them, but there are a lot of guys that are 1,000, 1,500 cases, that are much smaller than us, and for whom perhaps it's a husband and wife team that's doing it without paying themselves, and it's more of a hobby business. We're a real company, and I've got lots of employees, and we have a growth projection to eventually get to about 10,000 cases, which is a year, which is a permit that we have here.
No, that's perfect. You're right. There is a tipping point where you move from hobby to business, and it's one of those things that, okay, this is serious, and certainly you're at that mark at 5,900 cases by a long shot.
Yeah.
What I've been really impressed with, in addition to the property, and the property is impeccable, it's immaculate. What I like about it is the multitude of tasting experiences that a person can have from behind me to upstairs to in the library room where you are. I mean, there's a half dozen or more different experiences that people can reserve that are really exceptional. But what I like too is the diversity of the portfolio. So tonight we're talking specifically about summer whites, but I do want to discuss the whole portfolio. But let's talk a little bit about what's in my glass right now, which is the Sauvignon Blanc from Boucher Vineyard.
Sure.
And Sauvignon Blanc, noble French grape. But tell me why this one is special to you and why it has a tendency to be the flagship of the winery.
We've made a Sauvignon Blanc since our very first vintage in 2012. We like the aspect of it being crisp and bright and versatile and a great wine for summer. The Boucher Vineyard is down in the Russian River Valley, about 12, 15 miles from us. It's owned by John and Diane Boucher. Good personal friends. Family started out dairy farming, and John took his dad's dairy farm and started planting grapes 20, 30 years ago. We buy all of the fruit from this particular block. It's a little microclimate of their vineyard down in a little notch. Really, really beautiful little place. And, it's a special place for us. I really enjoy the personal relationships that we've been able to develop with the people we buy fruit from. They become our partners. They farm their vineyards in collaboration with my winemaker, Ashley Hersberg, and her team. And they're very much a part of the ultimate final product that goes in the bottle. Quality grapes, that you can rely on, having an honest party that you're dealing with.
Well, and they're pretty famous farmers from a standpoint of their viticultural practices. There's quite a few famous folks, the Rombauers, the Cake Breads, and those sorts of folks that source their Pinot Noir and Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And not many people know that they have this little tiny nugget of SB, and it's a great little trick that, or feat, and a testament to you that you're able to get this every year.
Yeah, I mean, it was a total coincidence initially. We were at a dinner party with John and Diane, and I was we had a source for our Sauvignon Blanc that in a year I got elbowed out by a larger winery in terms of quantity, and so I was looking for a more reliable source for Sauvignon Blanc with someone I could trust. And we were at a dinner party, and he said, I happen to have this little notch, come take a look at it. And we took a look at the fruit. We really liked it. It fit our profile in terms of the quality of fruit, but also how much tonnage was there. It wasn't, it was kind of Goldilocks. There wasn't too much. It wasn't too short. It met our needs. So it's been a great, I think 2017 was the first year that we sourced there. We've been sourcing ever since.
And now Ashley is relatively new to the program.
Yep.
And so Sauv Blanc is, I love this Sauv Blanc because it's not your typical grapefruity. And so it has the acid, it has the bright citrus, but what does Ashley bring to the program from a Sauvignon Blanc standpoint that was missing, or that you specifically wanted her to be the winemaker at Cast?
Ashley's a really, really gifted winemaker. She joined me the summer of 2019, as you would imagine, we tasted through all of our wines, back vintages, current vintages, stuff in the barrel, and we kind of went through each one and had an exercise in evaluating, is this a style we like? Is this a style we can build on? The historic Cast Sauvignon Blanc, it had a little bit of residual sugar. It was a preference of our founding winemaker, and it was something that there was a big following for, and we had been fairly successful selling. But it was a style that we weren't married to, and a style that we didn't think ultimately celebrated what Sauvignon Blanc has to offer. So we actually went through in that 2019 vintage, we went through an exercise. Ashley, my wife Ann, myself, and our hospitality manager, we each went out and found 2 or 3 Sauvignon Blancs from all around the world that we thought were interesting for some reason. We brought them in, put them in brown paper bags, and we did a blind tasting. And I think we had 14, 15 wines. And it was a really fun experience. And you had wines from $5.99 that you could get at Safeway to $180 Loire Valley special wines. And out of that exercise came an interesting kind of dilemma in terms of some wines that we really liked that were 100% stainless, that didn't see any oak at all. And then some wines that had been barrel aged and had a little more body. And so what we did in 2019 was an experiment where we took all the Sauvignon Blanc that came in, and we broke it down into 2 lots initially, and we pressed half of it off the skins immediately into tank, and we took the other half and we cold soaked it on the skins for 6 days.
Let me because there's a couple of folks I know, Doug Rutherford, Peter Glick, Jeff Greasy. This is where we tend to geek out on this stuff, and we love this stuff. What is, in both Napa and Sonoma, what would you say is the predominant way that Sauv Blanc is fermented? Is it stainless? Is it all over the board?
I think there's a little bit of everything, but the predominant way that most people think about Sauvignon Blanc is probably 100% stainless, very little skin contact. It is used as the fresh, bright, light wine in the portfolio, similar to a New Zealand style,
right?
A lot of acidity.
So then you decided to take 50% and put it in stainless, and then 50% cold soak on the skins for 6 days.
Yeah. And then we took each of those 2 lots and we divided them again, put half of each lot kept half of each lot in stainless and put half of each lot in oak barrels for 6 months. So we ended up with 4 lots that varied in terms of contact to oak and contact to skin. And then we went through a blending exercise, and we ended up with 2 wines out of that. We ended up with 100% stainless wine that is the wine we're trying today. And then we ended up with a slightly bigger wine that had a little more skin contact and oak that ended up fitting the profile of what won the day back in summer of 2019 in terms of the wines of the world that we love, that were Sauvignon Blanc. A wine like a Mary Edwards Sauvignon Blanc comes to mind in terms of something that sees a little oak and has been a phenomenally successful wine for that winery. Anyhow, that whole experiment, that whole exercise was done in a collaborative way with the team. It was done with an open mind and an open eye toward, what can this fruit bring us? What this particular vineyard, with the hang time we get, with the climate there, with the fog that we get every morning, what is the acidity? What is the profile of fruit that's going to, allow us to have something that's really special? And so we've gravitated. To be honest, the wine we're trying today, the 100% stainless, we're gravitating away from because we found the Grenache Blanc and have been so successful with that as a wine that doesn't see a lot of oak, and in this case, no oak, being the kind of fresher, lighter wine of the 2 that we'll offer going forward.
So, and then the 100% stainless Sauvignon Blanc, give me a little bit of the flavor profile distinct to this vineyard and to what you're producing, and then follow that up with some magical food pairings that you've discovered as a result.
So this wine has a naturally high acidity. It's nice and crisp. It's got nice tropical notes and floral on the nose, citrus and apple on the palate. It really wants to pair with shellfish or white flaky fish, stir-fried vegetables, fish tacos, something that has a brightness and acidity to it that can balance out with the wine. When you get into, you were discussing, you had salmon earlier. That's a little bit bigger, meatier fish, a little oiler maybe, and I would pair that with the Grenache Blanc instead, for instance.
Yep. No, and the Grenache Blanc is something I want to talk a little bit about, but I do want to say hello to Mark Salazar, Lori Potme, and also Susan Jensen. Great to see you all. Welcome. We're with Jack Seafrick. No commercial breaks this evening, so we're going to be on the full hour because we don't have sponsors. But other than that, yeah. Someone hashtag the Cubs before we get sued. The Grenache Blanc, I'm going to throw a poll question up for those of you that don't know. Grenache Blanc. Where did Grenache Blanc originate? France, Spain, Italy, Chile, and for extra credit, what part of France? We have a studio audience that was given the answer before tonight's event and still got it wrong. So we're going to give this 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. You guys are too easy. You should know, I'm sure the Greasies voted Spain. I'm just going to guess that Jeff and Jane, the answer is in fact Spain. I was shocked, Jack, when I was researching this, that it actually comes from a region in Spain. I totally thought the Rhone, and really blew me away.
Yeah, the original Grenache Blanc was an offshoot of red Grenache in Spain. It very quickly got adopted by southwestern France, and is best known now as one of the primary blending grapes in Châteauneuf-du-Pape in the Rhone. As a matter of fact, it's unique in that you're just as likely to find a little Grenache Blanc blended into a red Chateauneuf de Pop as you are a Chateauneuf de Pop Blanc. In that region, they put a little white. Sometimes they're field mixed out in the vineyard, but they put a little white in their red blends for the acidity and the brightness that it brings.
Doug Rutherford fell for for extra credit. Can I have a specific French city in the Rhone Valley? I apologize, Doug. It should be Grenache Blanc. I think that would give it more away with the Spanish. But so it's not a wine that is grown certainly or known commercially for Napa Sonoma area. What was how did you come across this wine? And I think if memory serves, it had to do with when opportunity strikes, you take advantage of it. And the pandemic certainly, while decimating in a lot of areas, it also presented opportunities. Talk to us a little bit about that and how the Grenache Blanc came to you.
Sure. Grenache Blanc is it's a wine that is well known in the sommelier kind of wine geek world. I think only about 2% of the Grenache Blanc planted in the world is in America, and almost all of the American Grenache Blanc is planted in Central Coast, Paso Robles and down in the Central Coast of California. We ended up coming into contact with a grower, Front Porch Farms here in Healdsburg. Backtrack to March, April, May of last year. Pandemic hits, everybody gets shut down, and a bunch of different wineries, depending upon their business model, are affected in different ways. And so if you had a winery that was really, really dependent upon tasting room visitation and or restaurants, you just got slaughtered, and everybody had to pivot. If you happen to have the connections and the distributors to get into the grocery stores and some of the online world, that's where everyone was buying wine for over a year. And so what happened was, out here, the 800 or 900 wineries in Napa and Sonoma, they all had different reactions. And I would say it was pretty evenly broken down between those who stomped on the brakes and those who stomped on the gas, and saw an opportunity. So the guys who stomped on the brakes started calling all their growers and saying, by the way, we're not taking any fruit this year. I know I've got a contract with you, but I'm not taking it. And I'm just giving you a fair warning. And so we started getting phone calls from people. Our winemaker, Ashley, is very well known in the community. Our reputation has developed nicely. And so we, having a small working winery of our own, having the flexibility to be able to react quickly, and having a little bit of confidence and curiosity, frankly, we put out the word that if you're a grower and someone's doing this to you and you need a home for your grapes, call us. And so we ended up purchasing about 4 or 5 tons of Grenache Blanc from Front Porch Farm as a favor to them, and also they gave us a deal because we were helping them out, and it was a grape that everyone sat around the table in our hospitality world and Ashley and said, this is a really interesting grape. It's not a wine everybody knows. It'll be fun to do. We can, there's not a lot of risk involved, and let's see how it goes. And so we brought the fruit in. We decided, a lot of Grenache Blanc is done with barrel aging, and it ends up being kind of plush like Chardonnay. But Ashley in particular had a notion that if we kept this wine in stainless steel, that it might be really interesting. And as we were tasting it through fermentation, we decided to go ahead and let it go all the way through malolactic fermentation, which added a butteriness to it, a creaminess of body that I think really kind of let the wine shine without being overpowered with oak. And so we ended up bottling this wine in early spring, and it has been phenomenally successful to the extent that we're now committed again to make Grenache Blanc going forward. And Front Porch, to their credit, kicked a few people out that weren't nice to them last year and gave us their allocation. So we're it's becoming a wine that we're going to be making every year.
it's an awesome story of just rising to the occasion, making certain that people are made whole. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the wineries relying on foot traffic, basically, like you said, stepped on the brakes, shut down, canceled contracts, didn't honor their contracts, quite honestly. And
Well,
we were
you
able-
can't really blame them though, Martin. I mean,
I can't.
everybody had a, you run a business, I run a business. I mean, you face realities. If you don't have any revenue, it's hard to pay someone for fruit. And rather than taking it and not paying for it, at least they called and said, we just can't take it. And
no, and that's what I think is a testament to the industry is having the wherewithal and the forthrightness to call in advance and say, we can't take it this year. And then for you to be able to step up and actually fill that gap is fantastic. I have a backtrack question on the Sauv Blanc. A couple of folks are noting a nose of petroleum, and they're curious the origin of that, and it's something that we've encountered. Usually, I get it more in some of the Viogniers, but tell me a little bit if you get that, or
I'm handing my glass to my wife, who's got a better nose than me. I'm not getting petroleum. Petroleum is what would you say? It's a pyrazine. It's something that you would normally get with Viognier.
But it might be something from aging in the wooden barrel.
It could be.
Yep.
This was not in wooden barrels, but I'm not getting that, Martin.
it was Doug and Liz. So Doug and Liz, see me after class, and we will go over your tasting.
We're very careful here at the winery to the customer's never wrong. The guest is never wrong. And so that's an interesting thing you're getting.
Well,
I don't get it,
both,
so I don't.
No, and both of them, this is one of the things I love about wine. And we used to tell people this when we owned the wine store for 7 years all the time. You're right. If you think this, if you smell this or you taste that's okay. That may be exactly what you're tasting. And I know Doug and Liz, I mean, they've tasted a bunch of wines and they are no foreigners to the wine bottle. So if it's a hint of petroleum in the Sauv and the SB, I can agree to that. But I do think that the Grenache Blanc, your description of it was perfect because it is fuller bodied. It is kind of midway between that crisp, tart acidity of a Sauv Blanc and then that fuller, creamy, sometimes almost too round body of a Chardonnay. And the folks that have paired it this evening with food have described this as an absolute winner. So
good.
We're very excited that you have actually secured more fruit for this because it is a fun wine. And I mean, the fact that it's from Spain is still blowing me away because we used to try to sell Rhone wines forever in the store because it pairs so well with food. And this is just another example of a wine that pairs very well with food. And as I said, you're right. Tonight it was a soy ginger salmon marinade and a cast iron skillet on the grill.
Perfect.
So
yeah, perfect. Yeah, this wine, the Sauvignon Blanc fruit is it's a thicker skinned fruit. It has a bit of oily unctuousness to it that is lower in acid than a Sauvignon Blanc. And as long as you don't overpower it with oak, in our opinion, as long as you don't overpower it with too much, oak barrels, it has this really nice kind of versatility in terms of what you compare it with. So, can you have this with a whitefish? Yeah. Will it be a little stronger than maybe you want? It depends on the sauce you put on the fish or how much you spice it up with herbs. But it's equally happy kind of going up against something a little spicier.
No, I could totally see that it could go with some heat. You're right.
Yeah.
I do want to show folks one of the unique things about Jack's space is really how big it is. And behind me, you can see, but there's just numerous tasting areas. And this is taken on a cell phone when we were there 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago. But what room is this, Jack?
That's actually the room I'm sitting in now. That's just you're looking at my view right now.
Okay. I like your view. So you can actually see the Adirondack chairs and then the vineyard and then across to the valley. Not bad.
Yep.
This is Duke. I can't promise that Duke will accompany you on every tour and tasting. I think Duke would like to, but
Duke's laying here at my feet right now. He would love to accompany you. So he's a rescue and he acts like one. He's a very grateful dog.
Oh, that's awesome. And this is us in the barrel room.
Right.
This is me just checking, as I do often, testing gravity to make certain that this one's full, and explaining to Denise, everything that goes on in this room. Here's Denise looking at a nice view off the back patio. And this is another area that people can have a tasting experience. Yes.
Right. That's what we call the winemaker's perch. It's elevated up above the vineyard. It has sweeping views of the forest behind us. So we sit on, we have a relatively small piece of property here. We have 15 acres planted vineyards, and then the other half of it is a dense, steep forested area behind us.
Nice. And here's another tasting area out front, the very, very famous piece of driftwood that you caught in the San Francisco Bay.
Yes, it's called Rudy. Rudy has its own Instagram page. That's a favorite place for people to snap a photo.
Yeah, it's an awesome, awesome piece of artwork, and it's just amazing. And that is our chief marketing angel, Ivy, who was with us on the trip and who is extraordinary social media person behind the scenes and makes certain that I don't wear Cubs uniforms to destroy the brand on national television. Here is a view from what we were talking about earlier, but this is actually Petanque. And it does, to Jack's comment earlier, resemble a lot of bocce. And one of the things for those of us that play bocce, not competitive, mind you, but they're two big, and Jack, you do play competitive, so correct me if I'm wrong. From what I understand, the two big differences are, in bocce, you actually take a couple steps or a step and a half, to toss the ball or roll the ball. In Petanque, you have to step in a circle. And in bocce, you are actually rolling the ball underhand. And in Petanque, you actually have a palm down grip.
That's not right.
Okay,
Sorry. I mean, oh yeah. No, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. So you're throwing an underhand with your palm down. You're
correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, Ann's correcting me here. Sorry.
Any other differences? I mean, other than, like you said, the ball size, and this is that little.
Yeah, the reason you're standing inside a little 2-foot diameter hoop is because the nature of bocce or petanque is that you have to throw the little couchinet, the little guide ball, between 6 and 10 meters, and in any direction. And so, if you go to anywhere around France, you'll see that in their public parks they're playing petanque, and out in the rural villages they're playing petanque in someone's backyard or in a vine row, and it's never intended that you have to have a special place to do it. And so they come up with this way of having a little hoop you stand in the distance is as a surrogate for having a fixed bocce court.
Well, and
like
you
you'd
said,
have in Italy.
It's tended to be 6 to 10 meters. It's not intended to be 40 or 50 yards where you're throwing it as hard as you can. But I also like this picture because you have, I mean, this is kind of the lowest elevation from a tasting standpoint. There are many Adirondack chairs down here, but this is $1 million view. And I can see where this would cast a spell on you because you're sitting here, the sun is setting, you've got this vineyard view across the valley. You can go up here to a little bit higher elevation, and then you can go up to where we just showed some pictures of. So there is a half dozen or more tasting experiences available to people. So this is a pretty special treat, and to have a petanque game break out while we're there is also kind of interesting. So thanks for the education and allowing us.
The thing I like about that picture, Martin, is there's a couple of bottles of wine there, and petanque is it's a sport I like because you can have a glass of wine in one hand and tossing the bull with the other.
Well, and let's talk about this one right here with the what shall I say, beer cap on it.
Yeah,
top. So tell me a little bit about what that is.
So that's a pet nat. So it's a sparkling wine. Pet nat stands for Pétillant Naturel, which is the ancestral way that sparkling wine was discovered thousands of years ago. So it's a methodology of making sparkling wine where you do one fermentation and you throw a cap on the bottle when you're almost done fermenting, and you let the fermentation finish inside the bottle, creating CO2. It's a little bit riskier, a little bit more variable, a little bit more of a hand-done experience. So it fell out of favor. It's another one of these kind of styles of wine that's coming back. It tends to have a little bit of a fizzier, bubblier, finer bubble texture to it. Typically very low alcohol and fresh. And so one of the things we did when the pandemic hit was we had a little extra time. And so we said, what are the things that we've always kind of thought about doing or wanted to do, but never had the time to do. And so we came up with the concept of the Cask Creative Lab. And we actually made 4 wines that in very small quantities, a barrel or two, 25 to 50 cases. And 2 of those wines were pet nats. We did a pet nat of Zinfandel and a pet nat of Pinot Noir. And so, the alternative in the way that most sparkling wine is made today is called the traditional method, which is kind of a misnomer, but the traditional method where you do a full fermentation, and then you add a little sugar and a little yeast, and you do a secondary fermentation. And that's a much more precise, manageable process that's very scalable. And so that's what, champagne from France or sparkling wines like we have here are traditionally done as. So the pet nat is kind of the old ancient way of doing things, and a little bit of it, you'll find pet nats. I think really they came back in favor first in the Loire Valley in France, and there's some guys in the Loire making some fabulous pet nats. So we wanted to do one, and we ended up doing 2 of them.
I think you're right. It's up and coming, and it's one of those things that's what's old is new type of thing. I mean, it's been around a long time, but it does seem to be very popular. If anybody would like to turn on their camera, I recognize I'm a little bit tardy on that. So feel free. We're going to switch over to on camera mode. I do think there was no questions. Okay. And I'm going to go unprompted by the Greasy Clan to Google Earth, because normally they're the ones telling me to get to Google Earth, because I need to show you this property behind me, because it is truly, truly, truly special. And you have, obviously, for those of you that are new to Cellar Angels, all we do is we focus on Napa and Sonoma. And interestingly, last night we were in another digital charity function with wine, and we were talking about just the proximity of water for Sonoma. And you have the Russian River, which Jack talked about, but there's 4 or 5 other tributaries here. But the Pacific Ocean is a huge influence, and there's not a single great wine region in the world that does not have a maritime influence. Even Canada, up in Okinawa, you have a maritime influence. So Bordeaux certainly has one. Spain has it. It's amazing, but Sonoma really benefits from it. And where Cast is, we talked about Healdsburg. I think it's just unbelievable, this property and its proximity to the ocean. So you have the winery right here. This body of water, Jack, I have not been up to, but I hear great things.
That's Lake Sonoma. That's a Army Corps lake that's 30 years old. I think it's now the water source for a lot of Santa Rosa and Healdsburg.
And then here you have Geyserville, which you mentioned earlier. You could, miss the stop sign on 128 and go right past the town. But here you have Healdsburg, a little bit further down, Windsor, off to Sebastopol. And this gives you a great perspective of just this whole Dry Creek area and the topography, hillside, mountain influence that impacts this growing region. But then when you get right down to where Jack is, it just gets even more special, because you're sitting in this idyllic spot. The vineyard has a little bit of a slope to it. So it's not as if you see this road right here from sitting in these Adirondack chairs. You're just looking at that beautiful view behind me and looking across the valley to these hillsides. And it's just all vineyards. It's all magic. And honestly, it does in fact cast a spell on you. And here's the forest that we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
But there's a beautiful tree down here where the the picture of Ivy was taken.
Yep.
It's a wonderful place to visit, and by whatever you want to say, quirk or happenstance or luck of the draw, you're actually perfectly set up for social distancing tasting, because you have so many different tasting experiences that are not, no one's going to be crowded 5 deep in a tasting room.
Yeah, that was certainly planned, that we wanted to have a facility that we could have an adequate number of people come through in a year to actually have a viable operation. But we didn't want anyone to feel like they were in a big industrial commercial facility. So we have a lot of little areas where people can, you know, have privacy and enjoy the views in their own space.
It's spectacular. It's the portfolio. We've talked about some of the whites. We talked a little bit about the pet knot. Run us through the portfolio, because most folks are thinking, okay, so there are sparkling and a white house. What about reds?
So, Martin, I think of our portfolio in 2 ways. We have a 6-acre vineyard that we farm here, and we grow Zinfandel and Petit Syrah, which are kind of the grapes that grow the best in this terroir, in this microclimate. And so from that vineyard, we actually make 6 wines. We have a white Zinfandel, totally dry, not your parents' white Zinfandel, if you'd be surprised. We have a rosé of Zinfandel. We have a Zinfandel. We have a sparkling Zinfandel. And then we have Petit Syrah and a Petit Syrah Zinfandel blend. So that really, from an estate fruit standpoint, we have those 6 wines that we're making right here on site from the fruit we're growing right here on site. And then we have our, you know, our wines that are sourced, where the fruit's sourced from neighbors. And so, you know, being proximate to world-class Pinot Noir and Chardonnay country of the Sonoma Coast and Russian River, we make a Bacigalupe Pinot, we make a Quail Hill Chardonnay. The Bucher Sauvignon Blanc, for instance, is from the Russian River Valley.
Okay.
And then we have right behind us, where your camera's eye view was from, is the Alexander Valley, where you have Jordan and Silver Oak and, you know, world-class cab. And so we do a Cabernet from a very well-known vineyard, the Pyramid Vineyard over there. So what we've done, and perhaps too much, but we've tried to have enough variety here where we really celebrate the bountiful fruit and the great variety of wines that you can get, you know, within a 20-minute drive from here.
Is there a challenge to constrain yourself?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think you can get. We were in a blending meeting this morning, and Ann told me, you know, you're making things too complicated, because I'm always thinking, wow, that would be a good wine, or that'd be a good wine. And so I do think, you know, from a business standpoint, you wanna try to have a focus, and you know, if you're not known for something, you know, then maybe you're never known for anything. But you know, as an embryonic business here, 7 years into it, really kind of trying to still kind of define ourselves, and also trying to serve markets all across the country. I mean, I have you know, we're from Texas. I have a bunch of Texas investors. We have a bunch of members and guests from Texas, and you know, they want their Chardonnay, they want their Pinot, they want their Cab. You know, when you tell them you're only making Zinfandel, you're really limiting yourself. And so what we've tended to do is take advantage of our winemaker's reputation and our proximity to some of these great vineyards, and really kind of allow our reputation to define itself over time. And you know, so far that's been fairly successful. We have a really clean inventory right now. Our wines are selling, and we're trying not to get ahead of ourselves in terms of making too much wine and getting in trouble. The sparkling wine has been if there was anything that was like a total surprise, you know, I always have liked sparkling wine, and not just for, you know, New Year's Eve and weddings.
Well, let me just back up and say, when Cast and when Jack talk about sparkling wine, this isn't a passing interest. So this is, they do sparkling wine correctly. I mean, there's Saber experiences. You can buy a Saber at the winery. For the record, you cannot get that through TSA. I'm just saying that will not work. But the sparkling program is impressive. And this is something that you said surprised you?
You know, when we first got out here, we were trying to open. We didn't have very much wines. I had access to some sparkling wine, and I thought maybe 100 cases, it'll be our greeting wine. I'm not sure if we'll ever sell any, but boy, I'll tell you what, we're selling 500-600 cases a year now of sparkling wine. We do Blanc de Blanc, Blanc de Noir, Rosé. We have the Pet Nats. We're about to, later this year, we'll release our first ever estate sparkling wine. So we're actually making a white sparkling Zinfandel and a pink rosé sparkling Zinfandel that would just blow you away, that you would never be able to tell that it came from Zinfandel. You know, it's such a versatile grape, and you get it away from the guys that soak it too long and put too much alcohol on it. And it's a really versatile, delicious grape that you can do a lot with. So we're having fun with that.
No, and you're right. It is interesting because you would never think of a Blanc de Noir of Zinfandel. I mean, that's like answer 5 of what you would think the varietal is.
Right.
So going forward, we've learned a little bit about the growth trajectory. And when people come out and visit you, what should they do in advance, or how should they come out and visit you to make certain that the experience is what we experienced and exceptional? And I'm not saying Duke has to be involved, but tell people what they might be in for.
Duke is part of the program. You can't get away from Duke, especially if you've got a little cheese plate. You know, the one thing I would tell everyone is, you know, the pandemic forced everyone, because of contact tracing protocols, it forced everyone to go by appointment only. Some of us have stayed by appointment only even after we've opened back up again. I think June 15th was the date that the governor of California took all the restrictions off. And it's really when we started to see all our friends from the Midwest and the East Coast and Texas again. The thing I would tell you is make reservations in advance. Make your dinner reservations in advance. Make your winery reservations in advance. There is a combination of a year and a half, and really when you consider the fires of 2019, 2 years plus of pent up demand of people that haven't been to wine country, all coming out right now. And that combined with the fact that a lot of us are still not fully restaffed. There's no labor out here to hire. You know, for every person looking for a job in a winery right now, there's about 15 or 20 wineries looking for that person. So you know, you have to be a little bit patient with people, and being by appointment allows us to be able to plan a little bit. So you know, and it's also allowed us to spend a little bit more time and have more quality time with our guests. So you slowly start to see a few people drop the by appointment thing, but that would be the people that I've seen out here have been really, really flexible and patient and accommodating and grateful to be back. Occasionally get a little frustrated because you can't have that same spontaneous trip that perhaps you enjoyed in the past, at least not yet. You know, I think maybe when we get to this winter, when some of that pent up demand's gone and we're you know, and we're back to maybe a little bit more normal, assuming we can stay normal between now and then.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know, it might change, but right now the caution would be to make your appointment in advance.
There's a constant struggle for entrepreneurs that start businesses to where there's an emotion that says, I am the luckiest person in the world. And then on the opposite end of that is the question of what on earth have I done? Where do you fall in what percentages at this stage of the game, leaving the Patent victory last night aside?
Yeah, you know, it kind of depends on what time of day it is. You know, we're really lucky. I mean, I consider myself a very fortunate person. We live in a country that gives us all the freedom to move around and the freedom to take risk. And I'm very fortunate to have some friends and family that wanted to invest in our proposal and in our project. And there's a lot of ups and downs in this business. But the thing that kind of keeps coming back and telling you you're doing the right thing is, there's not that many things you can do in life where almost everyone that you see that comes to visit us is in a good mood. We happen to have chosen a place in paradise where we live and work every day, and we have to constantly tell ourselves, don't take it for granted, because it truly is a place that makes people happy. The product, by and large, makes people happy. It brings people together, and so from that standpoint, I get a lot of enjoyment and satisfaction out of having built something out of nothing that does that. We end up having to deal with natural disasters, and I've been evacuated 4 years in a row for fire, and we've had a year and a half of having to totally change our business model to stay alive. And so those are all challenges, but at the end of the day, people have been making and enjoying wine as part of their life for thousands of years. It's not going to change. There are still people out there, thankfully, who appreciate a handcrafted product that isn't just, the cheapest thing they can find at Costco. And so, for the people who enjoy being introduced to a new winery, a new person that is taking their stab at this, and the personal relationship they can get, Sonoma is a great place to go to come. It's very common to run into the winemaker, the owner, the principles of the business when you're at the winery. It's not as large in commercial scale as Napa. We love Napa too, and I probably go over there every other month and have dinner or go to a winery, whatever. And it has its special attributes. But the thing we like about this place, and the thing that makes me thankful that we're here, is it's absolutely gorgeous. People around here really enjoy it, and we just like the scale of things. It's just more of a human scale here.
Well, and it's interesting. You hit upon something that is not true of every vocation. People genuinely come to you already in a good mood, and certainly if they are not in a good mood by the time they leave, they will be. And I'm always reminded of the worst alternative to what you and I do, and that would be the lost baggage handler complaint department at the airport. No one is arriving in that kiosk in a good mood. So it could always
if you come here today, Martin, I'm going to take you out in the vineyard. I'm going to show you what veraison looks like. We're going through a veraison right now, which is when grapes stop growing and start ripening. And that, especially on red grapes, because the grapes all start as these tart little hard berries, green, and they all end up as a dark soft sweet berry. And that process has started in the last 10 days here. And generally, it's roughly 6 weeks from the onset of veraison to harvest. So, there's always something going on in the vineyard. The vines are alive, the fruit's alive, and there's always something to see and do and touch and understand here. And, that's what's happening today here. If you come back in 3 weeks, we'll be bottling. And that's a whole nother, operation in terms of how that's changed over time. So anyhow, I digress.
No, that's not digress. That's a trivia question or poll question that writes itself. How soon after veraison will you start harvesting? And you just said 6 weeks, so 42 days to 45 days is a great example of when harvest will be this year.
And keep in mind, if you're harvesting for sparkling, you're going to harvest sooner. If you're harvesting for rosé or white, you're going to come a little bit after that, and reds are going to hang a little longer. So
exactly,
there's a variability to it.
No, Jack, thank you as usual. Very insightful. Awesome seeing you about the SB and certainly the Grenache Blanc. Really stepped up and spoke to the growers and said, hey, we'll be happy to take that fruit. And really like a view, it's a hallmark of taste and why this industry is so special. I mean, at Cellar Angels, we have a chance to do something and to do work that we're proud of, and to do it for people that care, many of who are on the broadcast this evening, with the hopes that they also tell others. And it's something that we want to get more and more people into the Cellar Angels tent so that we can share the wines of Cast and share the wines of others, of these small limited production producers. And this is the story that we want to keep telling, because these folks are doing fantastic things, making great wines. And we like to tell the stories that they aren't able to tell in a national audience. But next week, we won't be telling any stories because Mission Control and I are going to go see a mouse in Orlando. And then we will be back at it a week later. And we have Elise Nerlove from Elkhorn Peak, oddly enough, talking about Pet Knot. So we're going to have a whole episode dedicated to Pet Knot. And it is with great gratitude that we are saying thank you to all of you. Thank you to Jack and Ann, who spent an hour with us this evening to share with us the story of Cast wines, and specifically the Sauvignon Blanc and Grenache Blanc. And to all of you out there, thank you so much for all of your support. Be good. The dinner at the Greasy household sounded amazing. So cheers to you guys. Cheers to the Glicks. Scotland Kiefer. That's my Sean Connery impersonation. There's your 2 bottles, my brother. Talk to you soon. You guys be good. And dear Lord, let things look up on the north side. Take care, everyone. Cheers.